Does Bong Joon-ho's latest movie after Parasite hit the mark? Let's find out.
You've seen it before, haven't you?
Once more unto the bridge, dear friends.
Again and again until we're both dead.
There's only like 12 stories. They change around little details, but they're all pretty much the same.
Deja vu. Something very familiar about it.
Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, movie reviews and connections in mind. Mickey 17 is directed by Academy Award-winning director Bong Joon-ho and stars Robert Pattinson as Mickey, a man who wants to desperately get off the planet Earth, and in order to do so, he signs up for an interplanetary expedition as an expendable, someone who dies repeatedly, but then is reprinted with his exact same memories over and over again. But when a duplicate of him is printed up before the previous version is dead, he becomes a multiple, something that is very much frowned upon in this society, and all hell breaks loose. Now, this video review will contain spoilers of Mickey 17 as well as certain other things. I'll be doing my spoiler-free thoughts first and foremost, though, but just so you know, there will be some spoilers later on this review. But first things first, let's get into Mickey 17, spoiler free. Is it a good movie? Is it a good theater experience? I would say it depends on your expectations. I will admit I did. This probably wasn't going to end up being on my radar as a someone who I did not see Parasite, so I was not going into this thinking that it was going to be, Bong Joon's follow-up to Parasite. Well, what's it going to be? How is it going to be amazing on that level? Um, I went into this, thinking, conceptually that this is going to be similar to, and I'll cover this in the spoiler talk later. There's this concept of clones and stuff has been done in sci-fi before, and this kind of reminded me of something else that a different sci-fi property, and I really liked what they did with that. In that other sci-fi property, and I was hoping that that this movie might kind of utilize that premise more than it does. Instead, but what I mean by that is, you've got all right, you've got multiple. What is a multiple? Well, a multiple is someone who is, you got two clones of the same person, two different copies of the same person. They got the same memories. Well, who is real? What is this? It brings up the concept of, all right, well, what is the soul? Is the soul, split between those two persons? And they kind of touch on this in the movie where there's a montage like where they explain it's like, oh well, what if there's a multiple and one copy of this person commits a murder? Are all the copies complicit at that point? Are they accessories? Well, what? It's like that's the kind of like heady sci-fi stuff that is interesting. And then of course you've got the body double comedy shenanigans inherent with copies are like, oh well, I thought you were at the mall. Well, I'm here in the library. Well, what are you? Well, yeah, I thought you told me this. Well, no, that was my clone. It's like there's potential in this, and I thought that this movie was going to utilize it more. But aside from there's running narration with Robert Pattinson's character, throughout, and especially when the movie stops dead to explain what multiples are and what's going on. This movie doesn't take advantage of that, I think. Instead, what this movie tends to focus on is, there's some comedy aspects of this, but I wouldn't call it a raucous good time as far as comedies go. What I think this movie focuses on is satire, and there's definitely satire to be had, and I don't mind it being satire. I just think that the satire that they use in this movie in particular is A, overplayed. This has been going on for so long now, and B, it's dialed up to 11 to a degree where it's like it just becomes noise and it's exhausting. And this movie isn't terribly long. I believe it's like 2 hours 15 or something like that. but it feels so much longer just because by the time you get to the end of this movie, it feels like this movie's been yelling at you for so long that you just kind of want to go. I saw this at a 7 o'clock showing. I got out at like 9:30 or so. It's like by the time I was like, no, I'm ready to go to bed at this point because that was exhausting, and not a particularly fulfilling exhaustion. Like uh, and what I mean by that, so the main crux of the satire is focused on the the leader of this expedition, who is the Mark Ruffalo, who plays a failed politician named Kenneth Marshall, who then becomes the leader of this expedition to another planet. And there's very obviously satire of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement and all that. And like I said, I don't object to movies making satire. That I think you put yourself in the public eye, you become fair game to satire. I'm not against that. The problem is, even when he wasn't president, there was so much, we've had this satire going for, going on, 8 or 9 years at this point, and the satire hasn't changed in that time. Like it's the same, hit the same bullet points over and over and over again whenever this stuff's brought up, and that's not, it just gets tiring. It's like just bring something new to the table. Like Mark Ruffalo's performance is he does a pretty good job of going over the top, as well as Toni Collette, who plays his wife. I believe her name's Ilfa, and they're unhinged pretty much, and they do a good job of the performances. But after a while, it just gets to become white noise, and it's exhausting. So all that to say, that is drawing away from what I think is the star of the and the real reason to see this movie is Robert Pattinson's performance as Mickey. I mean, when we get to the point where Mickey is a multiple, you got Mickey 17 and Mickey 18. They introduced this kind of this interesting concept, and it's played out between Mickey 17 and 18, but it's also mentioned in dialogue. Yeah, oh, version 3 was a little timid. Version 7 was kind of whiny. Version 9 was a philosopher or something like that, where each printing is distinctly unique in its own. There are aspects of the prime Mickey's psyche potentially. It's like that's fascinating. Like Mickey 17, he's got kind of heart on his sleeve, and he's kind of demure sort of way, and then Mickey 18, he's almost a psychopath. Like he's basically, oh, I gotta kill everyone. It's like, no, what are you doing? Stop trying to kill everyone. And um, like that dynamic that could have been fascinating, and Robert Pattinson does a great job as both versions of Mickey. And I will say, like the best CGI is the ones where what you don't notice. And when both Mickey 17 and 18 are on screen, like there are very few shots where it's obvious that oh well they just did the split screen, and oh well they CGI'd Pattinson's face onto a body double for this shot or whatever. There are very few shots like that. It is impressive, you know. And that's the nice thing about this simple, it's a relatively simple concept we've been doing, people meeting their doubles for a long time now, and the effects just keep getting better to the point where it's very barely noticeable in this movie. I mean, there's one shot in this where Mickey 17 and 18 are lying down on the bed, and then there's someone else between them. And it's like, all right, that one's composed where it's very much a split screen kind of shot. But other than that, this was fantastic. And I will also give credit to the production design of this movie, because for sci-fi is very it's obviously it's effects heavy, and CG, it's going to rely on CGI a lot, and a lot of that's going to be potentially hit and miss. The CGI of this movie, it does not look hit and miss, probably because there's a lot of practical work done with this, and they work with the lighting to make it look like the CGI. What CGI there is it complements the lighting complements the CGI design, whether it be the spaceship, these futuristic trucks or whatever that they're driving by, or there's alien life on this planet. The alien life forms do look pretty darn good. And also this also feels like a world where I think it's set in like 2040 2049, 2050, something like that. It feels like a real world. Like, the sets, they feel very believable. Aside from there being, a spaceship and, there's like a hovercraft at some point near the climax, and these alien creatures, there's very little that I would point to as like, oh man, this sci-fi is just so out there. This is very believable sci-fi, and from that perspective, I have to give this movie credit. But besides Robert Pattinson's performance and the production design, I can't say that all the other elements really work. Like, there's so much going on in this movie. Like, there's a subplot where once you get Mickey 17, 18, well, Mickey 17 had a girlfriend, and then then Mickey then who then gravitates to Mickey 18, but then Mickey 17 meets another girl who was like, oh, is she gonna do it? It's like, that could be interesting. That gets dropped almost immediately. They got one scene with that, and then we're off to the races to the next scene. Then you got another subplot with all right. Well, we have Mickey's friend from Earth who is kind of a jerk, and he's now become a drug dealer on this ship. Well, how's that going to affect the friendship? That comes up a couple times in the movie, but that gets it gets picked up and dropped so many times. I feel like I forgot, like, oh yeah, that guy's in the movie, and then they make reference to the very beginning of the movie. And because this movie feels like it's so long, again, if once gets brought up again, it's like, that was in this movie. Oh yeah, that felt like ages ago now, and yet that's coming back in to the movie again. Why? I don't know. But and then, especially by the end, it's like it's not quite as bad as like the Return of the King multiple endings, but there are several points where it feels like the movie should end, and then just kind of it backtracks, and then it ends again, or then it backtracks again, and then it keeps going. It's like, just end already. And then by the time the credits do roll, it's like, oh, we're ending right there. I was kind of expecting there was going to be another flashback and forward again, but cool. So it's that kind of stuff. It's very uneven. And like I said, this feels like there's a lot of noise in this movie that distracts from the genuinely good elements of it, like Robert Pattinson. I would definitely recommend seeing this just for Robert Pattinson's performance, but I don't know how rewatchable this movie is going to be in the future. And that's what I think is going to be the make or break for this film. I definitely recommend you should go see it, but I can't say this is a great movie by any means. So if I was going to give Mickey 17 a letter grade, I would say this is a C plus. It's above average, but not a lot. However, on the scale of unoriginality, considering we don't see very many of these kinds of movies, this is definitely a studio movie that's it was bankrolled by a studio that doesn't feel like a cookie cutter, Hollywood algorithm generated movie. So I have to give this movie props for that. So on the scale of unoriginality, I would say this weighs in at kind of original, which is pretty impressive given the creative bankruptcy in Hollywood these days. So those would be my ratings for Mickey 17. Those are my spoiler-free thoughts on the movie. Now let's get into spoiler talk as certain plot developments and character arcs that may seem familiar to you and where you may have seen them before. I'm not sure if it was going to be too much of spoiler on this, but I didn't necessarily need to be cagey on this, but I don't want to give too much away on this. So the sci-fi property, I kind of went into this movie thinking that maybe they would explore more in this movie than it did. There's a two-part episode, two-parter in Doctor Who, series 6, entitled "The Rebel Flesh and the Almost People," where you also have this situation where it's an industrial setting. You have this molten flesh that people can program, and they manipulate. But then if someone trips and falls, it's like, oh well, it wasn't a real person. It was we'll just make another one. It'll be fine. But then when the mimics or whatever, I think the gangers, the doppelgangers is what they're called. They start getting sentience on their own, but then they're also copying the people who originally generated them. It's like, well, who's real? Are the memories real? It's like, that's kind of the thing that I was hoping that this movie would take more advantage of in this, instead of just kind of playing lip service to the philosophical concepts of it. Um, But again, that maybe that's just me as far as my expectation game, and I fully acknowledge if that's the case, and your results may differ. You may not have thought that at all, but that's just what I thought going into this. And then there's also again the character of Kai, her she was the person who she had a she starts to get close to Mickey 17, and then she gets invited to that to the dinner with Kenneth Marshall and his wife, and it's like, oh, you're going to be perfect for the breeder program for this new world or whatever, and she's like, oh, am I just a uterus to you? It's like, again, that's the satire, perfectly fun and perfectly good commentary to go with that. That reminded me of the episode of Agents of Shield from season 5. The character of General Hale, who she was in Hydra, and she's working hard to be this the top candidate in for the super soldier program at Hydra, but then like, no, you're going to carry the person who's going to be the ideal person for the super soldier program, so it's like your uterus is what we need. And so that kind of reminded me, that plot point reminded me of that episode. But there wasn't a whole ton that I kind of wanted to comment on. Like I said, this was relatively original for a Hollywood bankroll movie, and I'm not sure that's going to win it a whole lot of box office returns, but it'll probably earn some critical praise on that. But I worry that if this movie doesn't, it's not going to make $1 billion. It's just not. And I fear Warner Brothers is going to see that. It's like, oh well, we took this risk, and now we're going to lose all this money. We're just going to go back to the algorithm again, because that's what makes us money, right? That's what makes great art. No, but I fear that's probably what's going to happen. But overall, I would say I don't regret seeing this movie at all. I think this was a interesting watch and worth your time. What did you think of Mickey 17? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about my analysis? Do you agree, disagree? Did I miss something? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. Be sure to look for my next movie review, which will be for another Warner Brothers release, The Day the Earth Blew Up, a Looney Tunes movie, which this movie, I have not seen a whole lot of advertising for this. I'm not sure many people even know it exists, but it's coming out next week, and I'll be reviewing it here. Be sure to look for that. And if you like this video or any other video on my channel, please give me a like, share, and especially subscribe. I would very much appreciate it. Again, thank you so much for watching. But just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, you have seen it before.